When night falls, the tales that stir terror in the soul begin. Here there is no safety, and there is no escape from the dark truth. Every corner hides a secret, and every step could be your last. Do you dare to continue? Darkness and horror await you. When the townspeople talk about the abandoned bridge, their expressions change to fear and dread. The bridge, which was once a vital road connecting both sides of the city, has now become a symbol of horror and terrifying stories. No one dared to approach it, as legends spoke of dark things living beneath it, patiently waiting for their victims. Victor was a young adventurer who loved exploration. He had heard a lot about the abandoned bridge and decided that he wanted to find out the truth behind the scary stories himself. On a dark and quiet night, Victor prepared himself with a small bag containing a flashlight and a camera and set off toward the bridge. Upon reaching it, Victor felt a coldness seeping into his body. The bridge was covered in thick fog, and there were no sounds except for the sound of his footsteps on the old wood. He turned on his flashlight and began walking slowly, trying to ignore the strange noises that echoed around him. As he walked, Victor noticed shadows moving quickly around him. He stopped to take some pictures with his camera, but when he looked at the screen, he saw distorted faces and terrifying shapes appearing in the photos. Fear gripped him, but he decided to move forward to find out what the bridge was hiding. When Victor reached the middle of the bridge, he began to feel the ground beneath his feet slowly shaking. Suddenly, the bridge opened up beneath him, and Victor fell into a dark abyss. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in a dark tunnel beneath the bridge. The walls were covered in moss and vines, and there was the sound of water dripping somewhere far away. Victor began walking cautiously through the tunnel, trying to find an exit. Suddenly, he heard footsteps following him. He quickly turned around, but saw no one. The sounds grew closer, and when he looked back again, he saw a long shadow rushing toward him. He tried to run, but he felt the ground beneath his feet turning into quicksand, slowly pulling his body downward. As he struggled to escape the quicksand, he heard eerie laughter echoing in the tunnel. When he looked around, he saw distorted faces emerging from the walls, speaking in an ancient, cryptic language, screaming loudly. The walls began closing in slowly, as if they wanted to crush him. With difficulty, Victor managed to break free and run toward the end of the tunnel. His heart pounded, and his mind was filled with terror. He kept running through the dark tunnel, trying to escape the nightmares chasing him. When he reached the end of the tunnel, he found an old door covered in moss and mold. He slowly pushed the door open and found himself in a large room dimly lit by old candles. In the center of the room was an ancient and terrifying statue, resembling a human but grotesquely deformed. Its eyes were deeply carved, and it seemed as if it were watching him. Suddenly, the statue began moving slowly, and Victor heard whispers coming from every corner of the room. He headed to the other side of the room, trying to find an exit. As he neared the other door, the candles suddenly went out, leaving the room in complete darkness. Victor felt a cold hand touch his shoulder, and he heard a whisper in his ear, "You will not leave here alive." Victor quickly turned on his flashlight, illuminating the area around him. He saw distorted faces closing in on him and long, thin hands reaching toward him. He started running as fast as he could, and when he neared the door, he felt something pulling him back. He looked down and saw transparent ghosts grabbing his legs, trying to drag him into the darkness. In a desperate struggle, he managed to free himself and dash through the door. He found himself in a long, narrow hallway, faintly illuminated by light coming from its far end. He could hear the screams and whispers echoing through the corridor, but they weren't just coming from behind him. They were coming from within the walls themselves. He continued walking, feeling the pressure in the air grow heavier, as if he were sinking deep into the ocean. The closer he got to the end of the hallway, the more intense the pressure and the terrifying sounds became. When he reached the end, he found a large iron door, adorned with strange and frightening carvings. He pushed the door open slowly and found himself in a large courtyard under the bridge. The courtyard was filled with old, abandoned graves, and the surrounding trees were dead and twisted. In the center of the courtyard stood an ancient, dark well from which black smoke was rising. Victor heard a terrifying voice coming from inside the well, as if it were calling his name. Fear gripped him, but his curiosity drove him to find out what was inside. He cautiously approached and looked into the well, but the darkness was so thick that he couldn't see anything. Suddenly, thick black smoke surged from the well, surrounding him from every side. He felt cold hands gripping his body, pulling him toward the well. He screamed loudly and tried to resist, but his strength was fading fast. As his hands began to touch the edge of the well, he felt darkness engulfing him entirely, leaving him blind. He heard loud laughter echoing through the air and realized that he had fallen into the trap of the abandoned bridge, where no one had ever returned alive. The legends were true, and the bridge harbored an ancient evil, eagerly awaiting its next victims. In the moment when the darkness completely consumed Victor, everything stopped for a second, as if frozen in time. Then, suddenly, he felt his body being dragged with immense force deep into the well, as though being pulled into the deepest realms of the underworld. The voices around him intertwined, speaking in a mysterious, terrifying language, each one sounding like screams of intense pain. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in a dark, completely still place, with no source of light except for thin, misty threads glowing faintly in the distant horizon. He looked around and discovered he was surrounded by towering stone walls, covered in ancient writings and strange symbols that seemed to pulse with life. Victor tried to stand, but the ground beneath him was coated in a layer of black ash. With every move he made, the voices grew louder, and the fog thickened, gradually taking a clearer shape. He saw dark creatures ahead, embodying forms of pain and horror, slowly approaching him. Their eyes gleamed with a sense of malice, as if they had been waiting for this moment for eternity. Victor suddenly realized that this place was not just a prison, but a haven for lost souls and those who had failed to escape the abandoned bridge. The creatures closed in on him, as if expressing their victory in capturing him. The ash rolled forward, and the ground began to shift, as if it were alive, pulling Victor toward a massive chasm that was gradually widening. The whispers intensified, as if every trapped soul in this world was speaking at once, saying, "Now you are one of us. You will take your place among us, and you will never leave." With immense effort, Victor tried to hold on to the edge, but he felt an irresistible force pulling him down. The voices rose to a crescendo, turning into loud screams until his head drowned in the sound. The walls felt as though they were closing in on him, and the air became thicker, making it harder to breathe. Just before he completely disappeared into the chasm, he felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if his heart was collapsing under the weight of this dark world. In the last moment, he caught a glimpse of light within the chasm, but it was too far for him to reach. His soul felt as though it was being drawn into an endless depth, dissolving into the darkness. In the end, when he vanished entirely, a sudden silence fell over the well, as if everything had gone still. As time passed, the voices faded, and deep silence settled around the abandoned bridge, which returned to being a sanctuary for the ancient evil, patiently waiting for the next victims who would dare to explore it. The town breathed a sigh of relief, but the legend had embedded itself in their collective memory. Everyone knew that the abandoned bridge was not just a place but a gateway to a merciless, dark world, and anyone who dared to cross it might find themselves trapped in an eternal prison, where forgotten souls live in endless torment, waiting for the next visitor.